if you don't enjoy what you're doing, Sunday afternoons are terrible because you dread going back to work on Monday. You don't want to be at work. You leave as quickly as you're done for the day. You don't hang around. So if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you don't trust the people around you, it all falls apart.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where I bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, I'm here with Chris Sprague. He's CEO of Enluma Leadership Group and the author of Lead Without Limits, How Inspirational Leaders Make the Improbable Possible. Thanks for being here today, Chris.
Oh, Jason, thanks for having me. I know that podcasts are a labor of love, so it's a privilege to be here.
Well, this is my favorite thing to do. I would record these conversations all day if I could get away with it and not have other things to do. So I'm happy to have you here. Really happy to have you here because we're going to talk about some really great things today, including inspirational leadership, and I think that's really important and not talked about enough. So, what's your background? How did you come to write this book?
So it like many people, I would tell you I've had a non-linear background. Ironically, my education is actually in toxicology. But what happened was I took on roles of increasing responsibility in larger companies. And what I realized was I loved helping other people achieve more than they thought possible. And to do it in a way where you didn't consume them, you elevated them. And as my career went on, I realized I thought, I could mentor 5 to 8 people and lead a large organization. Or if I go out on my own, I've got the opportunity to help a lot more people at scale. So that's where the idea for the company came from. And with inspirational leadership, it's all about really how do your actions help others to become more and do more. And
I love that. And the book starts off with an assessment of the current state of leadership, which I think is really important and not a lot of people talk about. So what is the current state of leadership right now?
I think we have a lot of opportunities. If you look at the current state of leadership right now, unfortunately, there's still a massive amount of old school command and control leadership. And I think what happens is people are so focused on deliverables, meeting their quarterly projections if you're in a public company, and less so about how do you get there. So you have a lot of this old school command and control. And while it may feel good in the moment, what's going to happen is you really embrace mediocrity. Because what happens is with these leaders is, Jason, you come to me, you're chewing me out and you tell me, Chris, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm going to do just enough to make you happy and just enough so you go away. So that type of leadership is pervasive. Another challenge we have right now is leadership benches are not full. There's a lot of data that says that, when you think about the future leaders of organizations, we have some challenges. We have people that are not ready. We're also seeing with the younger generations, Gen Zs and millennials, that some are self-selecting out of becoming a leader. And I think it goes to those command and control leaders. If you see these tough, aggressive leaders who work all the time, have no work-life balance, there's people who are saying, yeah, I want no piece of that. And I think the other piece of the state of leadership right now is we have known for decades that great leaders can actually not only elevate an organization, but create a healthier environment where your healthcare costs are lower. Your absenteeism is better. People make less mistakes. But yet, for whatever reason, we've known this for decades, but we still get it wrong. We still have problems with creating that right environment where people can truly thrive and be their best. But, in my experience leading organizations, this is not an earth-shattering change that people have to go through. These are just mindset shifts to think a little bit differently can have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and people believe that military leadership is all about that command and control style of leadership. And I don't know if our viewers can see it, but you're shaking your head right
No,
now, and I can
no.
attest to that. We do that. We do that command and control style of leadership. We plan a mission, we fly the mission, we go do it, we follow the plan until it doesn't work anymore. But when we're not in time critical situations, when we're not in combat situations where we want to react as our training tells us, we're actually looking for people to take a lot of initiative in the military, to see something that needs to be fixed and to just go fix it. And it's always amazing to me out in corporate that we see a lot of that leadership style, and then they point at us and go, well, if it's good enough for the military, it's good enough for us, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. There's this almost love affair with senior leadership in the military where, a lot of the references they make will be related to the military. And it's just fascinating, that top-down hierarchical approach. But the reason I was shaking my head, now I'm not ex-military, but one of my favorite books is Turn the Ship Around. I'm sorry, it's not Air Force, it's Navy. But
we'll let that slide.
Yeah, we'll let that go. We'll let that go. But great book about the author was talking about how he was supposed to take over, the most advanced, most impressive submarine in the fleet. And at the last minute, he got assigned the oldest submarine, the least impressive in the fleet. And he realized he has been studying the diagrams, how that ship worked, that he didn't take charge of. And he realized very quickly that everybody else on that boat knew more than he did. So if he couldn't command people he needed them to step up. He needed them to use their experience and knowledge. And what was cool is then he ultimately turned that ship around, with the name of the book, but he also generated some of the most leaders of other submarines in the Navy for years. And but yeah, you're exactly right. People have this false assumption the military is do this, get it done, move on, but it's not like that. It can't be like that.
No, it certainly can't. And I think that's what a lot of leaders who read these military books, they take away the power and authority, the ideas of power and authority, and they leave out the parts of the books that are just as important, which are the accountability in conjunction with authority, delegating accountability and authority to other people, and developing future leaders, developing those emerging leaders to leave, in this case, a submarine better than you found it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so,
please.
Go ahead.
Please. No, I was about to say that should be one of the counterintuitive goals of any great leader, is to develop the organization so you're no longer needed. The reason being is you want to go on to do other things, to grow and develop. If the organization's reliant solely on you, once you leave, it's going to fall apart. And there's too many leaders, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where they want the control, they want that focus. Kind of, Jason, extension of your question related to the current state of leadership, because they think they're the most important. And when they think they're the most important, they think their ideas are the best, and they need to be in the know for everything. But the reality is, if I think my ideas are the best, the team figures it out, and then they start bringing me proposals that I think I'm just going to like, as opposed to what's the best idea.
Yeah, I've seen this both ways in military squadrons, both squadrons I've been in and squadrons that I've worked with, where a really charismatic leader who's kind of the center of everything leaves, and there are no emerging leaders, there are no systems, there are no institutions in place to keep the great work going. And I've seen it happen, fortunately not in a squadron I was in, but in like a sister squadron, where one of these top-down, authority-driven leaders comes in, and in a matter of months. And when I say months, I don't mean like 12.
Yeah.
I mean like 2.
Yeah.
Watch. And not even morale, but actual readiness of the squadron to go do its job in the real fight.
Yeah.
Sink down below the point where they were actually considered at an acceptable level of readiness. I've seen it both ways. One of the great things about what you've done in the book is you've gone and you've taken a lot of your own data. You've also gone and looked at a lot of the research to formulate the conclusions and recommendations in the book. What are some of the generational differences you've seen in motivation to work from your research?
It's interesting. From our research, I think it also ties to how the person was raised. I think it's very easy to say a Gen Z is not as motivated as a baby boomer. Well, it's different situations. Baby boomers closer to retirement, typically, right? A Gen Z, they may be coming out of college with a boatload of debt. So it's interesting because from an age perspective, we didn't see that many differences, really, honestly. And that's where I was leading more on my experience, where I'd been fortunate enough to lead organizations with hundreds of people. And what you see is you start to realize how people were raised and their upbringing. Are they respectful? Are they polite? I've seen Gen Zs and millennials who are incredibly respectful and polite. And I've seen baby boomers who thought they were entitled and should be. And I've seen the opposite. So I know we need to be careful with the generalizations. I will say the one thing that we are absolutely seeing in our research is the focus of Gen Zs and millennials on the meaning of the work that they do, the impact of the work that they do. And there is this desire and push. There's a lot of great studies that looked at why people take the jobs they take and looking at generational differences. And with Gen Zs and millennials, it's more lined up to what's the meaning of their work. There was one study that actually surveyed 1,200 Gen Z workers and said, how important is the meaning to your work? And 86% said yes. And actually 74% said they would take a pay cut if their work had more meaning. And I thought that's fascinating. And it speaks, Jason, to the work you're doing, the work we're doing, of the value of leaders to provide that meaning and purpose. And that's going to shift even more as the working generations shift more towards the younger generations.
Yeah, that's what really stood out to me in the studies you talked about in the book, the data you showed in the book, is that Gen Zs and millennials are much more apt to take action about meaning in their work. And these surveys go back 100 years. This is not new information that people want meaning in their work. You can go back almost 100 years and you see the same thing about how much they want it. But millennials and Gen Zs will take action. They will leave for a lateral move or a pay cut if their current leadership is not helping them find meaning in their work. And that's our job as leaders. Now, one thing I did notice about this data is there's no data about the Gen Xers. And look, I'm a Gen Xer. We're used to being left out of stuff, but was it just that it kind of lumped in with what the baby boomers were? I'm curious. It seems like a big gap of the workforce, especially in leadership areas, to leave out.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm a Gen Xer as well. So because we tend to focus on the poles, right? The baby boomers and the Gen Zs, where the baby boomers close to retirement. There is a shift towards meaning with the Gen X workers, but it wasn't as profound as the Gen Z. And I think stepping back, we have to consider what are the life experiences of Gen X versus Gen Z, right? I personally remember in the 80s of the first mass layoffs, and that started to become a thing, right? Whereas before that, we would have friends and family who worked for the same company 30, 40 years. They literally got the golden watch. They got the golden handshake. But now when you think about Gen Zs, these are generations that all they've known is companies do layoffs and their share price goes up. And it's funny because then you'll have more senior workers in companies will say, well, Gen Zs they're not loyal to companies. And I'd turn around and say, well, why should they be? They haven't seen a track record of companies being loyal to their employees, which is really a shame, but also a huge opportunity. So, Jason, I'd say it's kind of Gen X is kind of in the middle, but it does tend to, a lot of the studies tend to compare baby boomers to Gen Z just because it's so different.
Yeah, and jokes about Gen X aside, you and your team did go get a lot of data, look at a lot of research for writing this book and the other work you're doing, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Where did you get the data that you based all your analysis on? Tell us a little about some of your data sources and the data you collected yourself.
Yeah, so what we did was we interviewed over 420 people. And our focus was in the book, it took us a few months, but we landed on the definition of inspirational leadership based on a John Quincy Adams quote of, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you're an inspirational leader. And the reason we landed with that was it's all about actions and the impact you have on others. It has nothing to do with title. So with our interviews, we wanted to focus on the recipients of inspirational leadership. We figured if someone is investing time and energy in your growth and development, you're likely to be more energized. You're likely to be happier. We know when people are growing, you're likely to work harder. So we wanted to look into groups that were able to achieve incredible results where people happily worked hard, which also suggested it's a sustainable group that's very productive. It's not like a one and done type of thing. It's reproducible. So we surveyed and interviewed 420 people. We asked them if they've ever been part of one of these groups. And I'll tell you, before we did the survey, I thought, maybe at best it'd be 50% to have experienced one of these groups. And we had people from their careers a few years to more than 30 years. So we had a good distribution of the workforce. And what happened was 90%, they had to say they experienced one of these groups in their career. And I was just blown away because to me, that's like free range inspirational leadership. It's happening out there in the wild, but we haven't tapped into it and we're really not encouraging it to happen again. And so we dug into it a little bit more and we really were interested, what were those key factors that drove people to work so hard? And I would say there are two that were surprising and there were two that we saw coming to some degree. The two we saw coming, one was they said we were constantly talking to each other. We were constantly sharing information. So in our book, we call that we accelerate the progress. And with accelerate, they said we wanted to make sure everyone was equipped with the data, insights, and expectations to succeed. Because when you think about a people leader and direct reports, if the direct reports don't know the expectation of the boss, it's like they don't know what sport they're playing. And how can you win if you don't know what sport you're playing? The next one that was kind of expected was they said we were doing something that no one else had done before. It was going to help a lot of people, or it was very meaningful. So they phrased the why behind everything towards impact, which was huge. Now, so we say that was realize a better future. The two that were surprises, the first one was they said there was a team first mentality. It was a we before me culture. And that one was surprising because they said, I didn't want to let the team down. I wanted to see the team be successful. I wanted the team to do well. And we'll get into the layers in a little bit, but that one was a surprise. The other one that was a surprise is they said we were constantly pushing and challenging each other to be better. And that one is interesting because it has to be based on trust. If you and I trust each other, we're working really well together, then you can say, hey, Chris, why are you doing that? And I can say, oh, well, I'm doing it because of this. And so that trust really enabled them to push each other to be better. And we found those 4 elements. And then the next piece we said, and this is largely based on experience, was, okay, if we have these 4 elements, does it differ based on role? As an individual contributor versus a people leader versus if you have the opportunity to lead an organization, is that different? And we said yes, because the objectives are different. When you're looking at peer leadership, arguably the toughest leadership, it's all about how can you create an environment where the other people can thrive? And we can talk about some of the stuff, the simple things you can do to do it differently. The other piece with people leadership, it's how can you help your direct reports be their best? And thinking about that team first element, it's be your best individually and collectively. Because I'll tell you, there are times when I was leading teams, it's easy to focus in on those individual team members to say, okay, you're doing great. If we could do this, that would be better. But it's a little bit harder to say, okay, what could this team achieve together if they worked really well together? Just a little bit of a mindset shift that could have a huge impact. And then the last one with inspiring and leading an organization, it's a little bit different because then it comes down to two elements. The first is, what is the strategy of the organization? Where is it going? And then also, what's the run rules for the culture of how to get there? If I can share a quick story with you. I had the opportunity to lead a turnaround of a call center of about 160 people. And we were starting to do business forecasting. And in the process, we were seeing that, holy cow, our volumes may go up substantially in the next few years. So we were starting to look for another location where we could expand. So in the same day, I can't make this up. In the morning, I'm with a colleague and we're looking at a new space. We could put 80 people here, 60 people there. And then later that day, I was doing one-on-ones with all the team members. And at the end of this one-on-one, team member said to me, Chris, I just want to ask, is it true you're closing down the call center? And I'm thinking that morning, I'm looking for space. But what I realized is they didn't know where we were going. They didn't know where we were going. So how can they help to get there? So what we did, that kind of lit a spark. We started to build a multi-year plan to provide that clarity. And then what happened was people started to come up with ideas on how to get there. They weren't asking about, were we closing? They were saying, hey, could we do this? Hey, could we also do this? Because they knew where we were going, it made it so much more powerful. And just an example of, if an organization knows where it's going, it can be a force multiplier because then everybody wants to help because they want to be on a winning team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that it was surprising that you thought about only half of the people you surveyed would have been involved with one of these high performance, high meaning teams. It actually doesn't surprise me that it was almost 90% or over 90%, whatever the number was, because I think that's what's so frustrating to a lot of people is we all have experience being on a really high performing team, even very young, whether that was through sports or a project team in school or in our first jobs or early jobs. And that's why it's so hard when we see the absence of that. Yeah. And when we see the absence, it really is an absence of all of the elements you talked about. Teams can be really good with some of the elements you talked about. They're really great with if they've got all the elements you talked about. But we've all been in both situations where some or all of it was there, and then where none of it was there, and that's really, really hard. And I think what it comes down to is, as you said, a lot of leaders are left to their own devices to figure this out. And it's important if we want teams to succeed to systematize this. And that's what you've done. You've systematized it. So tell us a little bit about the Enluma leadership model. You've mentioned the elements of inspirational leadership. Tell us more about the model and the layers of leadership.
Absolutely. So with the model, it's the combination of the four elements I talked about: team first, accelerate, elevate, realize, going against the three layers of foundational leadership, which is leading your peers; people leadership, that traditional, I have direct reports leadership; and then organizational. Within that model, what we've done is we have themes at the intersections of that 3x4 model. And with that, we've been able to build out 360s. We use them in our workshops. We use them with clients. And what we found is people really appreciate we're providing them actionable results in their 360s. It's not just theory. We want to make it very practical so they walk away with very clear action plans. And Jason, I should have shared, Enluma, the name of our company is Enlighten and Illuminate. You join those two together, you get Enluma. Because what we want to do is we want to illuminate the path to great leadership, but we want to enlighten people to great leadership, but illuminate the path to get there. Because so many times, we have to challenge, I think, the industry in the regards that people go to workshops, they take courses, and then you're just kind of left by yourself to figure it out. I was joking with a friend that the leadership industry, when it comes to courses and workshops, it's almost like if you have a problem with your roof and you pay a guy to come out and tell you, yep, you've got a problem with your roof, good luck, and not actually fix it. It's how do we help people get to the point where they actually improve, they actually get better. So we're really excited what we're working on and what we're looking in the future, because our goal is to help a lot of leaders at scale, particularly entry-level to mid-level leaders, because we think that based on what we're seeing, they're the ones that oftentimes are the ones that just can't access personalized leadership development.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a really important aspect you mentioned of foundational leadership that I don't think it's talked about enough. And it was something that when I learned it, it really cracked leadership and success wide open for me. And that's peer leadership. I learned that at the mid-level. I had wished I had learned it much earlier in the early stages as an emerging leader.
Yeah.
Tell us why peer leadership is so important and what emerging leaders, those new leaders right now, or people who are seeking to be leaders can do to build up their peer leadership.
Yeah, no, Jason, you're so true. It's so right, because when you're just starting off as an individual contributor or even a entry-level supervisor, it's easy to think about internalize things and think about, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, but not how am I impacting the people around me? You know, one of the things we like to say to our clients is with Elevate, think about someone who's hard to work with. And everyone can immediately think about someone, right? And most people say, oh, that person's a jerk. They're hard to work with. And then we ask them the question, are you making the situation worse? And then it's the holy cow. You know, people typically pause. There might be a sigh. Because I can give you an example. I had a very hard peer to work with. And what I found was I was being extremely careful with what I said to him. But he took that as I was not engaged because I was quiet. So that made the situation worse. So what we try to tell people is think about what you can accomplish with your peers. Also, one of the easy questions you can ask your peers is, what obstacles are you facing? And then, what can I do to help? Because that goes a long way, because it shows, hey, we're in this together, that collective opportunity. But also it helps them to realize that I want to help you. I'm putting my ego at the door. And then Jason, to your point, the reason that's so important is, you know, an entry-level supervisor may not see that issue because they're managing the time of they're managing their teams. But as you go up in an organization, if you and I are in the C-suites and we don't play nice in the sandbox, we are inadvertently giving permission to our entire organizations to not work with each other. Because I'll tell you, I've seen in large corporations where people know the head of commercial doesn't like the head of operations and vice versa. And that provides this permission to not have the teams work well together. So it starts off when you're an individual contributor, and those expectations should start when you're an individual contributor, and they become so much more important if you have the opportunity to go up in the organization, because it can absolutely hamstring and silo the organization.
Yeah, I found during my time in the Air Force at this mid-level that I'm talking about, this mid-level management, that there were a group of us that once we all understood the strategic guidance, when I say strategic guidance, I mean like from the 4-star level. When we all understood that together and started working with each other to break down the internal obstacles we had in our own squadrons, we were able to come up with solutions that met the strategic guidance. And that as it got up to the colonel level of the year, we were all like majors, lieutenant colonels at the time. As it got up to the colonels were like, well, this meets the strategic guidance and I didn't have to do any work. Check, let's go forward with this, right? Egos got put aside real quick when a reasonable solution that met the strategic guidance was placed in front of all the colonels. So you actually can fight this siloing by, at the mid-level management level, working together. It's important to understand the strategic guidance. You all have to be on the same page with that, and then you all have to understand each other's obstacles.
Yeah, 100%. If people know where they're going, that is a huge opportunity. The other thing as a leader, Jason, to add what you just said, sometimes as a leader, you have to give the permission and empowerment to others. And what I mean by that is I remember one group, head of quality control for a larger company, and we needed to implement change management. So every time we put in a new IT system, what are we doing beforehand to prepare people? What do we do afterwards? And we identified a few folks and I said, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's some tools and resources. Take 2 weeks, come up with a plan, and come back and let's talk. Very clear expectations. They knew where we were going. And I'll tell you, the times I've done that, 19 times out of 20, they blow me out of the water. Because you're giving them the opportunity to come up with the ideas. You're giving them those chances to really own something and to do something for the boss. And it's just amazing if you have the opportunity to do that. And to your point, I'm like, hey, this is great. And I didn't have to spend the time. I can work on other stuff. Not that I'm just sitting around, but, you can work on other things and be more impactful. And you kind of spread that authority across the organization. That can be really powerful.
Yeah, history, especially recent history, the last 25 years in tech is littered with mergers and acquisitions that did not succeed because a CEO or the acquiring company tried to impose its culture directly on the new company coming in. They didn't let anybody work on how do we actually bring these two companies together. It was, This is how we're going to do things. And history is littered with, especially in tech, of those M&As that did not go well and really brought some really prestigious companies to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. You say when company A and B merge, we're not going to have company A culture. But we want to accept people and have a great culture. And that's really hard to do. Because eventually the acquiring company, push comes to shove, will want to be the one who makes the decisions and kind of tell people what to do. So yeah.
100%. All right. I want to take a break from all this serious leadership stuff. I want to play a game. Are you up for a game?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'd like you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Do not be fooled by the word rapid. You don't have to give a one-word answer. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like. We just want to get to know Chris a little bit, okay?
Sure. Absolutely.
All right. Chris Sprague, rapid response round. Your time begins now. A podcast recommendation.
Oh, it's got to be How I Built This, Guy Raz. I know it's been around for a few years, but if you're growing a business or thinking about launching the business, listen to a few episodes, because then you can get an idea of what you're really in store for if you choose to go down the entrepreneur. It is a wonderful podcast.
Yeah, How I Built This is great, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, but lots of lessons there for if you're a leader in a larger organization as well.
Absolutely.
Especially if you'd like to bring innovation and entrepreneurial mindset to your team.
Yep, absolutely.
A practice you'd like to see more people embrace.
We cover this in our book, and it sounds simple, but it can be very impactful. I'd say to your viewers and your listeners, for 5 days, once a day, think about something that you know, information that you have that someone else does not have, and then share it with them proactively without them asking. What's going to happen is then they're going to say, oh, Jason shared this with me. I should think about what I should share with Jason. And there's this multiplier effect. And we've done this with a number of clients now, and it's consistently powerful. Where they say, one client said, we started doing this for a few weeks, and all of a sudden the strategy discussion started to surface that we've never had before. It's very simple. This can be with peers. This can be with direct reports. Obviously, don't share, sensitive HR stuff with people. That's not a good idea. But, think about maybe there's meetings that you're in that other people are not, and sharing that information can be a huge impact, and it can be powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can all accomplish when we all have all the information that's relevant, right?
100%. Absolutely.
Who is someone we should all be paying attention to?
This is a really interesting question. I think right now, with everything going on, even if it's hard to hear, people should be paying attention to those people that make them better, that push them to be better. I think about my wife, my pastor, my parents, best friend from high school. I have a coach right now I'm working with. They make me feel uncomfortable, which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Because I think right now, if you look in society, we are steered by algorithms that are pulling us to the lowest common denominator. And so to be careful with who are those people that help you to be better. And it's going to be different for every person, right? But you'll know that they make you better because they make you think differently and you feel like you're growing when you're around them.
Yeah, that input can be hard to take, especially in a time where, depending on what LLM you like to use, it's always telling you how great you are and how great your question is and how smart you are for asking the question. And here's an answer that fits right exactly with what we think you wanted to get, the answer you wanted to hear. It's important to get that feedback that challenges us.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you start to think you're the smartest person in the room, that's a sign you're not.
Yeah. So if you're listening, LLM creators, I could do with a little less telling me how great I am and just giving me answers. I already have a high enough opinion of myself. You don't need to tell me how great.
Doesn't need any help.
What is your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
You know, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so it's got to be the Rocky theme song. If that doesn't get you fired up and ready to go, I don't know what does.
Yeah, for our younger viewers or listeners, there were movies in the 70s and 80s about Rocky that were very different than the ones you've probably seen. You may have seen them, and the music is fantastic. So, the biggest influence in your life?
It'd be hard to say it's not God. I lean heavily on that. It ties to my values. It ties to what I do, what I feel like I'm being called to do, and as a servant leader. So I would think it's got to be that, and it's something I lean on every day. And ultimately, the goal is to make an impact and to do His work.
All right. A book everyone should read.
You know, I think this is one maybe not a lot of people have heard of. It's Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. It is a wonderful book, not just about questions, but mindset. The author, Marilee Adams, she's fantastic. She talks about the judger mindset versus the curiosity mindset. And so what happens is if you're in the judger mindset, it's why did Chris screw up? Why did he do that? You know, why is this so bad? And you go in this downward spiral. But if you lean in on curiosity, it's like, okay, do I understand what's going on here? How do we fix this? How do we prevent this from happening again? What am I missing? And it is such a practical and powerful book because it helps you work with peers. It helps you with direct reports. It helps you in relationships. And having that and that curiosity is so powerful because ultimately that judgment mindset is just going to encourage and lead to stagnation and blaming and pointing fingers.
Yeah, that was a hard lesson for me. It's still something I kind of have to remind myself of is genuinely asking, do we understand what is happening here or what happened here? Even more so than how do we fix it and make sure it doesn't happen in the future? Because even that's kind of all right, we're kind of looking to blame some people, but do we really understand what went on here or what is going on here? Really unlocks different options for success in the future.
Yeah, and of course, if someone keeps making the same mistake over and over again, that's a different story. But typically, people don't want to make mistakes. How do we learn from it, move on, and get better?
Your favorite recreational activity?
I would have to say, now this is counterintuitive because I'm in Chicago and it's very flat, but mountain biking. It is wonderful to be outside on a trail, getting exercise. You can kind of be out there by yourself. It is a fantastic workout, but also it's just kind of a regrounding that I absolutely love.
That's great. Your dream vacation spot?
You know, I would have to go, a place that I've been really interested in going to is Machu Picchu. For a number, one, it's crazy to think that it was only discovered, I think, about 100 years ago. So here's this city up in the clouds in the Andes. When you go there, you have to acclimate to the altitude. and then it's a hike in, a hike out. But there's just something about Machu Picchu. I would love to go there. Haven't, it's on the list, but hopefully that's going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah, that's a fascinating place, and the work still continues there. They're still doing amazing archaeological and historical work there. What is a trend you're excited about?
I think it's the one that we already talked about, and that is what we're seeing with the younger generation, really hungry for meaning and hungry for purpose. That's going to change how we work, and in a good way. The other one that I'd give you two. The second one is, how do we put AI to work for us and not to replace us? And specifically what I'm thinking about is, we're working on a tool that will enable entry-level and mid-level leaders get 360 feedback. You get an AI coach. You also have access to interactive courses, and then you can connect with peers, even outside your company or organization, to learn and work together. Because, we really want to work hard to help that entry-level, mid-level leaders and leaders in small, medium-sized businesses who just historically they couldn't access personalized leadership development. So that's one of the things I'm excited about, and excited to see how that unfolds in the next few years.
Yeah, and I do want to dive into the tool a little bit in just Absolutely. A few minutes. Last one, favorite sports team or player?
It's got to be the Birds. Grew up in Philadelphia. If you grew up spending time in Philly, they are the team in Philadelphia. And I think my favorite past player would probably be Brian Dawkins, and current player Jalen Hurts, just from the standpoint he takes so much flack and so much criticism, but he handles it with grace, and he always takes the high road. You'll never hear him badmouth anybody. He always owns accountability, and I think that he is a model that a lot of us could follow.
Yeah, he's a true professional for sure. All right, well, thanks for playing our game. It's fun to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
I want to dive back before we get into the tool, and I do want to talk about the tool you've developed. Going back to, we understand that building emerging leaders doesn't just happen on its own, or at least you and I understand that. I hope more people are understanding that with this podcast.
Yeah.
In the book, you talk about the idea of leadership glue to hold all we talked about together.
Yes.
What are the elements of that leadership glue?
Yeah, so the two elements that really pull everything together are trust and fun. Because if you don't trust each other, you think about a we before me culture. If I don't trust that you're going to think about me and talk about me, or if you flip it and do a me before we culture and you take credit for other people's work, it falls apart. The other piece is the fun piece. And this one, it's interesting because this can be kind of controversial, because there's many senior leaders that don't want to talk about fun or that people enjoy their work. In the wisdom of teams, I believe it was Katzenbach interviewed thousands of people when they're at their leadership best. And they said, when you're at your leadership best, what elements or factors always happened? And there was two, out of those thousands of people they talked to, there was two elements that always came out. The first was they worked hard. No surprise, right? The second element that happened in all of the thousands of interviews was they had fun. They enjoyed what they were doing. Because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, Sunday afternoons are terrible because you dread going back to work on Monday. You don't want to be at work. You leave as quickly as you're done for the day. You don't hang around. So if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you don't trust the people around you, it all falls apart. So that's where we're leaning. And ironically, those were the fifth and sixth elements in our research behind the top four, was trust and enjoying what you're doing. And to clarify, there may be some listeners who say fun. This is not buying a ping pong table for the break room. This is not just kind of blowing off meetings and hanging out. It's, do you really enjoy what you're doing, and make an environment where people enjoy coming to meetings, they enjoy doing their work, and they enjoy making things happen.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to look at that, right? It's not about the ping pong table. It's not about the open office floor plan. It's about, what do we do here so that people aren't dreading Sunday night because they're dreading going back to work Monday morning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you lead a larger organization and you create that environment where people dread it, you've now ruined a lot of people's Sunday afternoons. Every single week.
Absolutely. So let's get into the tool. You talked a little about what it does, who it's for, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What I think is great about it is it's data-based, it's analytics-based on the research you've done.
Yep.
Before we talk about like the tool itself in a little more detail, what were some of the analytics you decided were important to track, and how did you choose them?
Yeah. So it's based on the research, talking to people. What we did was we leveraged our research plus existing research to identify what were those metrics that led to action, that supported our model, but not only supported the model, but helped people realize and live the model. So what we did was we also did tests of the model and the surveys. I've been doing those for the past year with clients real time to make sure that we have differentiation in scores, but also the elements that we assess people on have to land. They have to resonate and they have to lead to action. Because if they don't lead to action, it's just a waste of time. They're taking a 360 survey and it's not getting them to where they need to be. So then, and we also benchmarked against existing literature and making sure that really pressure test the model to make sure that it holds up and it's consistent.
So what does the tool do to lead people to action?
Yeah, so we want to make this as user-friendly as possible. What users do, they come in, the tool will ask them a few questions about their background, their interests, career interests, and that determines which of the leadership layers they qualify for. Once they answer just a few questions, they can do the self-assessments for the leadership layers. They will then send that to stakeholders. You'll get the feedback from stakeholders. And then looking at your results, this is where it all kind of jumps off, where the direction where it takes off. In that, I look at my results and maybe I'm in the people leadership layer and it talks about how I'm scored low, that my staff meeting meets my team's expectations and provides value. So I would click on that, and then the AI coach will open up and say, okay, Chris, I see you want to work on your staff meetings. Here's 3 suggestions. Which one of these are you interested in, or should we do a modification of one? And by when do you want to get this done? So it's very actionable. It's time driven. The other is based on your results. It can recommend an interactive course if you want to learn more. And this is via our AI partner, Axio AI, where you have interactive courses that provide just a little bit of information. You read it, provide a question, answer a question, and then that'll determine the next piece of information to help you learn. It'll also do role playing. We've got videos connected to it. So it's just a little bit different way that you can learn. And then the other piece is if you opt to share your data up front, when you click on those items to work on them, there's a button that you can click on that says, okay, Jason, would you like to see who else is working on this? And it can be in different companies. And we figure, especially for small and medium-sized businesses, that you don't have access to huge networks of people. It's an opportunity to work with a peer to make progress. It's an opportunity to grow your network. And then that all ties back to your development actions on how can I actually get better. So we're excited. Our plan is, like with the courses, we'll offer new courses, add new courses every month that people have access to. We also take suggestions. We're doing a soft launch in March. So if people are interested they can absolutely reach out on LinkedIn or our website, enlumagroup.com. And what we're doing in March is we're giving people a year access for free. And then we're asking them their feedback. And then they're basically becoming our super users that will then get access to new functionality as we roll it out. One of the things that we're working on is an AI assisted development plan, where you also, in addition to your results, you can say, okay, today I'm maybe a lab analyst. In the future, I'd like to go into marketing. It will then provide a path for you, provide courses, pros and cons you can learn. It'll tie it to your survey results. It'll tie it to the courses you're taking. That's going to provide us more robust insights for the AI to help you get better and have better actions. So we're excited. We're really excited to put this in front of people because we think we can help a lot of people who typically would be overlooked and they wouldn't have access to personalized leadership development.
That's fantastic. And what is really fascinating about all this is that you are a relatively new company, just about a year old.
Yeah.
You took the leap into entrepreneurship. What's the biggest lesson you learned about leadership from developing this tool and transitioning your company from what was a services-based company to essentially a tech company now?
Yeah. I look at the lean startup methodology and it's the power of pivot. It's from a leadership perspective, especially on entrepreneurial mindset, you have to understand when things don't work. You have to understand if something's not working. For example, we were doing on-demand classes last year and we spent a lot of time and energy building those. There was no uptake whatsoever. We could have kept pushing that harder, but we realized there's no uptake and there's a lot more momentum and energy around the AI tool that we're building. So it's more to shift the focus to that. And then how do we get this stood up and also get feedback? And I'd say it's not about having a perfect tool. It's having a tool that will help people. And if you take that approach with whatever your business is, then you can't shoot for perfection because you'll never get there. It's about getting it in front of customers, getting feedback so you can iterate and improve because ultimately they're going to tell you where you need to go.
Sounds like you're doing all the right things for a tech company. What else is coming up for you in the company in the next few months?
Yeah, so we've got the soft launch in March. We're also going to do a Kickstarter in the May time period. And then we're looking at June of this year is when we'll do the broader launch with the tool. It's going to be exciting. And then there's a bunch of talks that I'm going to be doing or have applied to do. So more on those. I'll post those on LinkedIn and share with people as those come up. But yeah, it's really getting us prepared for the broader launch in June and getting the word out and helping people realize that, this could be a great tool for them and also build their network and grow as leaders.
That's great. It sounds like a lot coming up for you. Now, I left out a lot of the practical to-dos from the book on purpose because I want people to go get the book. Yeah. But what's something an emerging leader can start doing today to make the improbable possible?
The one piece, take 5 minutes. And even if it's peer leadership or direct reports, think about what is achieved when people work well together. The collective opportunity, not the individual opportunity. It takes just a few minutes, but so often we don't think about that. We don't think about what we could achieve together. We think about what's on my to-do list and why someone's not helping me finish my to-do list. And having that perspective can change. And then you may realize, yeah, I shouldn't have some of these things on my to-do list. And there's other things I should be focusing on. Because what that does is then you focus on something bigger than yourselves. It's a collective opportunity that can only be achieved when you work really well together.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you for joining us today, Chris. This has been really amazing and enlightening. Tell everyone where they can find the book and where they can find you so they can thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So our book's available, most book retailers, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. Also, I can be reached on LinkedIn, Chris Sprague at Enluma Group. Also, our website is enlumagroup.com. Also have a Substack under Chris Sprague as well. So those 3 areas. And I try to put out content, meaningful and insightful articles a few times a month. So if people are interested, they can also sign up for the Substack for free.
All right. And we'll put all those links in the episode description so you all can thank Chris and check all those things out. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening today. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. And since I'm asking everybody for favors, if you're on a podcast platform and can leave us a review, please leave us a 5-star review. It helps build the audience and get conversations like this great one with Chris today out to more people. And we're going to be bringing you lots more conversations like this in the future. So go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.